We can't start out laughing.
Yes, we can.
It's an inside joke. Good evening, everyone. I'm Imani.
I'm J. Bernard Ma'at Kynes.
Yeah, I'm that too. And together we are Sankofa Institute for Wellness and Progressively Yours Health and Wellness Podcast. Thank you for joining us for another wonderful, wonderful episode. We have a fantastic guest who's waiting in the background. And before we introduce our wonderful guest, again, just greetings to all of you. I know we've had some issues with Facebook. If you can't get us on Facebook, please check out our YouTube channel, Progressively Yours Health and, well, I won't even try. Put that up for me, please. There you go. It's a long, but I think if you just type in Progressively Yours Health and Wellness Podcast, it will pop up. On YouTube, our numbers are growing, and we're excited about that. And so we're grateful to each and every one of you. Spread the word. Make sure you like us and ring the little bell so that you get announcements of shows that we have, upcoming shows. And so I'm now going to turn it over to Bernard.
Thank you very much. And I join in with Imani in welcoming each of you to the show. This evening, we do have an outstanding guest whom I met at an ethics workshop and just couldn't wait to get him on the show. I think I even mentioned to him that day. So we're looking forward to his conversation with us. But before we begin that, it is our ritual and tradition to have a brief spiritual opening. And you're free to participate or not. I like to ask if you want to participate, to find a comfortable seat or place to be for this 1 minute mindfulness meditative moment and reading from Thich Nhat Hanh, who somehow I've been reading a lot of him lately, and it's really been helping me to center down within my own inner self and be very mindful of my own breathing in and out. So let us begin. I want to invite you to just close your eyes and relax your body. I'm going to use and strike a different bowl tonight rather than using the tingshaws. Three breaths in and out through the nose, deep and full. Relaxing your shoulders and letting them drop a centimeter or a millimeter. Relaxing the muscles in your body. The ancestors have granted us permission to proceed because they celebrate as we open our hearts for deeper healing and deeper self-transformation to increase both our knowledge and the wisdom as we share in the lives of others as well as ourselves. These words from Thich Nhat Hanh, transforming your past, number 284, your true home, the everyday wisdom of Thich Nhat Hanh. He writes in number 284, transforming your past. If you behaved badly in the past, if you have been destructive, you can do something about it. By touching the present deeply, you can transform the past. The wounds and injuries of the past are still there. They are within your reach. All you have to do is come back to the present moment, and you will recognize the wounds and injuries that you have caused in the past and those that other people have caused you. You should be here for these wounds and injuries. You can say to them, I'm here for you. With your mindful breathing, your deep looking, and your determination not to do the same thing again, then transformation of your past is possible. Transforming the past by being active in the present moment. Mm-hmm. It is indeed for the ancestors that we transform our past by living in the present. Ashe.
Ashe.
And namaste.
Namaste. And that living in the present in order to clear out and kind of fix the past so that you can move forward in a more positive and progressive ways. It's done differently, but it's practiced in so many cultures. So often I keep saying I want to bring up the issue of Ho'oponopono, an ancient Hawaiian practice of basically a forgiveness, but it's forgiving. It's working on self to help everybody else, both behind you and ahead of you. And the 4 statements of Ho'oponopono, I know I've mentioned it on the show before, are I love you, I'm sorry, please forgive me, and thank you. And it's just so very powerful. But it's a practice that they use to help neighbors to come out of conflict, to help families to come out of conflict. And then also the practice in South Africa, soul constellations. That a good Dr. friend, Dr. Mark Armstrong, does these circles called soul constellation, and it's done to heal 7 or 9 generations behind you, as well as 9 generations ahead of you. So very, very, very powerful, and it's a good thing to do.
Yeah.
People carry so much stuff, and a lot of times the stuff is really not ours. It comes from somewhere else in our DNA and our family line. But by working on it in the present, we can help those behind us as well as those ahead of us.
Yeah, and that's why I'm excited about guest Jordan tonight, because as he talked about his work with children, we can see how some of these injuries began very early on in these developing stages of life, and so we carry those early life injuries on into our adult life, and they don't go away. And that's what I take from TIC, that we internalize them, we act them out, both consciously but largely unconsciously. And so by being in the present, offering them love, offering them compassion through our breath is very, very important. So you want to make the announcements about what we got
just
on?
A couple announcements, because I really want to get to Jordan Yates. But one is we've talked a lot about the red light bed. That is very healing. It's a system. It looks like a big tanning bed, but it has red lights on both the top and on the bottom. So you're laying there for just like a 12, 15-minute session. But it gets deep into your cells and helps to activate your mitochondria and gets all of your energy going. So it's a healing session, and it affects people differently. But we've had so many stories of positive impact of the bed. So we encourage you, if you're in the Atlanta area or if you're going to be visiting, please reach out and come. We've got a real low discount first trial price for people that come through. You can call that number on the screen. You can also call 470-861-7266, and we'd be happy to get you on the schedule. You won't regret it. Most people who come, before they leave, they schedule their next visit or their next set of visits, because it's such a powerful experience. So we welcome you and hope that you can come see us.
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, why don't you go ahead and introduce Mr. Jordan?
Yes, my pleasure. Yes, I'm honored to introduce a brother that I recently met, as I indicated earlier, at an ethics workshop. This is our year to renew our license, and we are required to have 5 hours of ethics, and we renew every 2 years. So we wait for these workshops during, usually, at least for me, the year sometimes that it's time for the renewal of the license. So I met Jordan Yates at this workshop, and we hit it off right away. And I said, I'd like for you to come on the podcast. And he said, just extend the invitation and I'll be there. So who is Jordan Yates? Jordan Yates is an MA licensed professional counselor, LPC. Jordan Yates spent 7 years in sports journalism before transitioning to a career as a clinically trained therapist. He has interviewed people of all ages and for nearly 20 years, gaining mass communication and therapeutic skills. As a sports writer, Jordan covered the Atlanta Falcons, the NBA, and various college, high school teams. In 2009, he interned with the Cobb County court system, becoming certified in child-centered, trauma-focused cognitive behavioral therapy. Since 2010, Jordan has counseled diverse populations, including children, teenagers, young adults, parents, and families. In 2022, Jordan founded and became the director of RecPlay Counseling Center in Peachtree Corners, specializing in recreational play therapy for older children and teenagers. This innovative approach helps disengaged youth helps disengaged youth to become more involved in the counseling process, addressing issues such as ADHD, anger management, academic challenges, and trauma recovery. Jordan holds a bachelor's degree in English literature and journalism from Georgia State University, and a master's degree in marriage and family therapy from Richmont Graduate University. It is indeed an honor and privilege that we welcome to the show a brother who will share with us out of his richness of experiences in many walks of life, Brother Jordan Yates. Come on aboard, Jordan, and join us, and welcome to Progressively Yours Health and Wellness Podcast.
Hey, good evening.
Good evening.
Hey, Jordan.
We're honored that you're here tonight. And before we get into the heart of who you are in terms of a professional, take us back in your own journey, your own life. You mentioned earlier before we came on live that you grew up in a house that was full of testosterone, I do believe. So tell us about the first, what comes to mind when you think about the first 12 years of your life in that home? What are some of the first thoughts that you free associate, and just help us to understand who you are from that context?
Oh, you started with the haymaker. That's a heavy question to start us off with. My goodness. First 12 years, I can say I was very blessed. I was the youngest in my family, a family of 5, 2 older brothers, in a very, I would say, affluent area. My dad was always working. I don't ever remember him taking a day off from being sick. And my mom she was a full-time mom that made it clear that education is the top priority. And I had a dad that made it clear that you can do that while you play sports. So I got baptized to, making sure I get good grades and all the major sports from a very young age. And just being the youngest and soaking it all in, I was also very blessed to have older brothers that were and are still great role models in my life, where I never found myself having to scramble to figure stuff out because I learned through them, and mostly for the things that they were doing right, as opposed to with some other younger siblings seeing their older siblings and learning from what they did wrong. My older brothers were and are just great, and my parents set a good example for us too, especially those first 12 years. And if there was anything that was going awry, I was kind of sheltered from it, in the sense bubble of just being the youngest.
Where did you grow up?
So I was born in New York, Spent my first 5 years there. Moved to Philly from 5 to 10. And then I moved down here to Atlanta back in 1992 when everybody's excited about the Olympics coming to town in 1996.
Right.
And when Metro Atlanta was really starting to boom. So it was nice. And the weather was warm. I think I probably only saw snow 9 or 10 times. Meanwhile, every winter in New York and Philly, I remember when I was baptized, I would, as a young age, it was expected for my brothers and I to, when it snowed, to go out there with our shovels. And I mean, early in the morning before my dad went to work and shovel the snow so that he could actually take his car out and drive to work. That did not ever happen when we moved down here to Atlanta.
No, I know the feeling. I'm from New Rochelle, and I just hated the cold. I kept saying when I grow up, I'm moving south, and that's why I'm here. After spending many years up there, though. So,
I was born in the Bronx, but I was only there for about 3 weeks. So
you can't claim New Yorkhood at all.
I didn't get to experience that well. And Mom and I came to South Georgia very early on.
Well, before you say that he can't claim it, Michael Jordan was born in Brooklyn for only like a few months, and then he moved to North Carolina.
Really?
He still claims New York.
I tried, but I have someone who said, "Well, you can't claim. You can't claim." And I said, "Yes, I can. I got the picture of the hospital where I was born, Women's Hospital."
Let them know.
And,
it's no longer there.
It's no longer there, but I have the picture.
And you're here. So that's what
well, thank you for those early years, and it sounds like that you had a fantastic family that nurtured you, and being the youngest of 5, you had all this wisdom that would show you the way and pave the way for you. As the youngest, would you say that you were spoiled or not so?
Spoiled by my mother for sure.
Oh, really?
And because of that, and it was good to have that balance in my house growing up, because if I was the only child, I would have not been given realistic expectations of adulthood. I had older brothers that did not like that my mother spoiled me, and they helped ground me and balance me by reminding me I'm not that special.
Oh, yeah. So you had help to get this balance into place. Is that right?
I mean, I didn't appreciate it at the time, but it really did help. I don't know if that's what they meant to do, but that was a good balance. But yes, my mother definitely spoiled me, and she explicitly would say, you're the baby of the family. You're my last one. And then when I got older, I didn't like being spoiled. I wanted to kind of make it on my own. And that was that's another conversation for another day.
Gotcha.
Wow.
Yeah, I wouldn't say I was nurtured by my mother, but not at all nurtured by my father or my older brothers.
Okay. Gotcha.
But they just set the path by just modeling what it is to kind of grow up and do things correctly, and to take pride in your work, to, do your best to do well in school, to put your best, output on at the basketball court, football field, baseball diamond. I learned all that from my father and my 2 older brothers.
That's wonderful. At what point in your life did you have it in your mind that you want to work with children, that you want to support young people? Did it happen later on, or was it part of your earlier thoughts? I always thought I was going to grow up to be a child psychologist, and I didn't, but but I did other things in terms of children's activities and education. So when did the thought come to you? Was it during your journalism?
It did, and I envy that. I wish, because I feel like I'd be a better clinician if I did have that drive from a young age. But no, it's the exact opposite. Going back to Michael Jordan, I was literally born the day after he made the game-winning shot for North Carolina. And then growing up in the 80s, to have the name Jordan, I know Jordan's a popular name now, but it wasn't that popular back in the 80s. And he was ascending to becoming probably the most famous athlete of our generation.
Right.
I wanted to be the next Michael Jordan. That's what I wanted to be when I was a kid. I mean, I thought I was going to be the next Michael Jordan all the way up until maybe 7th or 8th grade. And definitely by my sophomore year in high school, when I was more on the bench than I was on the court, that is a wake-up call.
Mm-hmm.
And so again, having older brothers and seeing them go to college and get internships and try to, as they're figuring stuff out, I was like, okay, if I'm not going to be good enough to play basketball, I'll cover it. I'll be on ESPN. And that's like the next best thing.
Right, right.
And it was really cool going to school at Georgia State because there was so many internships. I mean, you were downtown Atlanta.
Yeah.
So from a very young age, 19, 20 years old, I'm in the Atlanta Falcons locker room.
Wow. Nice.
Nice. And I remember 2003 when the NBA All-Star game came down to Atlanta, which was Michael Jordan's last All-Star game when he was playing for the Washington Wizards. Mm-hmm. And Mariah Carey came out and sang him "Hero Comes Along" during the halftime show. I was there. It was really cool.
Yeah.
So I really enjoyed doing my internships in college.
Mm-hmm.
When I graduated from college and had to get a real job, it wasn't as fun, cool, or as fulfilling. Number one, because I sent my resume out to the ESPNs, the Sports Illustrated of the world,
mm-hmm.
and they did not reply. I'm sure they get so many resumes. Mm-hmm. But I had to find a job. Sure, I had to pay bills and had rent to pay. That's nothing. My parents are not the type of parents you can come live with us. No, you've left the nest. Do your thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I found was covering like high school sports at a local newspaper. That's how far I go back in the journalism world. Back when people read newspapers. When's the last time y'all saw someone with a newspaper?
I remember those vaguely.
Yes. I was going to think of it. So I did that for 3 years, covering high school sports, college sports. But I would say about a year or two into that, it just got so redundant. I still enjoy sports, but when you do it for a living and you're having to pretty much the same sporting events, whether it's basketball, baseball, football, write it up. I mean, there's only so many synonyms that you can, put out there before it all kind of sounds the same. So it was becoming unfulfilling.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have imagined that. And it was very humbling because, again, I wanted to be involved in sports from a young age. And then from my teenage years, I was like, okay, I'm going to be on ESPN. And then just like, I don't know if this is going to be my path because this is not doing it for me. But what I really did enjoy, probably the only thing I enjoyed near the end of my journalism career, was interviewing athletes.
Right.
Because that's something that was different every time.
Mm-hmm.
Even if I was interviewing the same athlete. And I remember getting in trouble with my editor-in-chief at the time because I eventually became sports editor, which was cool at a young age of the newspaper that I was a part of. Mm-hmm. And I remember getting into trouble because some of my sports features on the athletes, I remember one of them didn't even mention the sport that the athlete played because I was more interested in the personhood, the story of them.
The story. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. And I didn't know at the time. I mean, it's easy for me to see it now, but I was very fascinated with, like, we would obviously start up talking about sports and then it would venture off into something else. And I was not a trained therapist at the time because the people say, wow, you got kids to open up to you even before you became a therapist. I think the fact that I wasn't a therapist, I didn't come across as a know-it-all adult. I just asked questions and listened because I didn't know what to say. I was just very curious. Got these kids to open up even more so to me because they're not used to having an adult listen to them instead of speak to them or, impart wisdom. I didn't know what to say. I just listened and asked questions. And then I would put them on the front page of the sports section and it was a cool little deal. And then I started to realize that, I'm only talking to the athletes. I bet you the non-athletic students have a story to tell me too. But they're not deemed worthy enough in my field for me to even sit down and talk to them. And that messed with me. And that was the moment when I was like, you know what? I've never thought about being a counselor, but from what I've seen in movies and television shows, you got to sit down and hear somebody's story and help them. I wasn't at that point qualified to help. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to go back to school and become a counselor. And I'm going to abandon my dreams of being on ESPN one day because that just wasn't doing it for me.
Mm-hmm. Well, I know when I hear people ask children, young ones, so what do you want to be when you grow up? And it's like, I so dislike that question because we can be many things. And on our path, it's like what you did in the early part of your career was kind of a stepping stone to get you where you landed. So there's nothing wrong with that early part. You had to go through that to get to where you ended up. So I think we can be many things in life, don't you?
I do.
Yeah.
So how did this continue to transform into the founding of the RecPlay Counseling Center? And you sound like you were inspired and wanting to hear more of their stories. Tell us about the founding of RecPlay.
Yeah, great question. So it's interesting because I'm very grateful for my training, my master's program, and then all the conferences that I've attended throughout the years. But going back to my master's program, even though it gave me a great foundation, I realized pretty early that I'm trying to put this in a very delicate way, that you almost have to, in order to come across as genuine, relatable, authentic, kind of throw out half of what you learned. I mean, not throw it out, but put it on the shelf and just be present with your client as who you are, connected to yourself, which they don't necessarily teach you in grad school. So I would say I struggled initially because I was the one that read all the books and had my cape on and was ready to save all these kids' lives. In my arrogance, I'm sure I interrupted my kids when they would open up to me, unlike what I was doing when I was a sports journalist. And I already had the answer and the solution for them before I even got to know them. So I had kids early on, way back in 2009, 2010, that did not want to come back and see me, and I don't blame them. Because I had the book knowledge, but I didn't know how to utilize it. And I was too busy trying to prove that I knew how to help them, as opposed to just being curious and seeing what it is that their parents have brought them in there to me to see and what they want to get out of it. Not just their parents' goals for them, but what goal do they want since they're forced to come in and see me? Because let's be honest, when you see kids, they're not the ones making the phone call or writing the email to come in and see you.
That's right.
Even though that's happened on a few occasions, which to me is more of a red flag, but we can talk about that later. So when I realized that the importance of just being more connected to myself and how I did my quote unquote counseling as a kid, because I didn't do any kind of traditional counseling, I didn't see a counselor at all, was through just being active and playing sports with my friends and with my brothers, and just kind of, letting loose and that as an outlet, and had some really good conversations, not only while playing, but I still play basketball to this day. I'm the old guy at the gym, but there's a lot of good conversation that's had right after you're done playing when everybody's just kind of resting and drinking water, just talking about life. And you're just more, the juices are flowing, your brain is working, and you're just more in the mood to talk, and it's not as awkward. So I started implementing that into my sessions. I had started off with a little hoop in my room, the one that you put on the door. I started buying board games because at that point I had people underneath me in my office, so you had to be careful with one-on-ones and because it would interrupt other people that are trying to do their office work. And then when I just kind of continued to develop and go to counseling center that I guess had more of the facilities necessary for a bigger stage for rec play counseling, recreational play, therapy. It just flowed even more so. So now, not only do I have the hoop in my office still, now in the same building, I have a real basketball court, ping pong table, pool table, pickleball court, and these students, they don't see it as counseling, but they experience all the benefits of counseling, and then the parents benefit from that in turn. And it's worked really well. And I would love more clinicians to not only continue to do play therapy, because there's so much value to that, but when the students age out of play therapy.
Yeah. At what age? At what age would you that transition takes place?
I would say between 3rd, 4th grade. So like around 9 years old, at least with boys, because there were times, I would say around 10 years ago, where I'd still bring out the sand tray and the coloring books with my 9-year-olds, and they look at me like, what do I look like?
That's for
Let's
kids.
go play on this basketball hoop right here. So that's, again, now that's anecdotal. So it's been my experience that right around 9 years old is where they want to move a little bit more. We're just playing Jenga and checkers, even if it's therapeutically rigged, which a lot of my activities are. They want to move. And I would say also, unfortunately, middle school and high school have taken out a lot of the physical activities. When I was a student growing up, we had PE every day.
Every day.
Right.
Every semester.
Every day. Yep.
In elementary school, we had recess every day. That is no longer the case.
Yeah, that's crazy. I mean, it's such an important part of our development, as young people. So they're really losing out, by not having that. And of course, kids are gaining weight and all of that whole piece, just because they're not getting but the mental is also connected to the physical, in terms of what you get out of the physical activity.
Yep.
So, what do you think?
Yeah, I was wondering, where did you start seeing children and young teenagers and adolescents during that transitional period, or when you started working, were they already had recreation time and it had already ended?
Wait, what do you mean by that?
Well, when did it stop? When you started really actively seeing children and young adults, at school already ended the recreational period for them, like we did when we were growing up?
Yeah, I would say, again, when I started seeing students around 2009, 2010, I'm sure the shift happened before then.
Yeah.
And then again, I don't know. I'm only really familiar with the metro Atlanta area, and especially the northern suburbs. Very affluent, even the public schools have the academic workload of a private school.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, that's what they're paying the property taxes, school taxes for. So at some point between when I was in school and when I decided to become a counselor, something changed in schools. They took counseling out of the school.
Yeah.
I remember, I guess it wasn't necessarily a counselor, like a licensed professional counselor per se, but I remember when I was in school, if you did have, an issue go on, you could go talk to your counselor. And then it was depending on what the letter of your last name started with. That would be like the counselor you talked to. But then they started making cutbacks in the school system, and some music stuff went, PE stuff went, counsel went, a lot of things got removed, and then just so much more academics
Right.
put in, which I'm the type of therapist where I feel like you're only a kid once, you're only a teenager once. And I want to honor all my students at the age that they are by trying to bring back as much of the innocence as I possibly can as a therapist, and tell their parents as well, because I feel like school systems, because now it's this big business, unfortunately is robbing a lot of our students of the joys of childhood and adolescence.
Yeah, I would agree. And when I was doing some of child play therapy back in the 90s, Trudy was my supervisor, Trudy Post-Sprunk. And the challenges and the pain and the suffering and the stress, even back there then, was highly elevated. I only did it for a few years because I was seeing more adults. So I'm wondering, what are some of the stressors and that you are experiencing today that when children come to see you? What are some of the presenting problems that they are coming in for at this point in time?
Oh, that's a great question. I mean, a lot of it depends on elementary school, middle, high school. Any particular?
Yeah, just whatever comes to mind.
I would say, since my demographic is mostly middle school.
Okay.
Which people look at me like I'm real, like, how do you see middle schools for a living? That time was torture, like, for us. And me, I'm just like, oh, it's a beautiful time, because I feel like middle schoolers are starting to really explore their own identity around that age, with still enough of the innocence, not that I'm a nope, I know it all, don't tell me anything. And like where they fit in. And it's before they start really stressing about adulthood. So for my common middle schooler, their parents bring them in because they're either being incredibly disrespectful to them, they're having poor grades, or something just happened to them, and that's like they feel like they've lost their child. Their child is a different person. And that sometimes is a result of bullying, sometimes it's a result of just the innocence bubble bursting, because some of their friends are starting to date now, and they're like, well, I kind of think girls are pretty, but I don't want to start dating yet.
Hormonal changes.
Hormonal changes, yeah. It's a confusing time. So the kids, because they don't have the language or the vocabulary or the wherewithal, instead of communicating their thoughts and feelings, they just will act out. Or unleash. I put it unleash. And they usually do it on the people that love them the most unconditionally. Because deep down, they know, I can be as ugly as I want to my mom. She's still going to forgive me. But if I'm really mean to Evan, the biggest kid on the schoolyard, oh, that's going to be a problem, because he's going to hurt me physically. My mom's not. So that's what the parents will email me, will leave a message and say, hey, don't know what's going on with my child. He's not open up to me. Hopefully he'll open up to you. Now, when they actually get into the office, the student, what they usually will bring up are just, I would say, low self-esteem, anxiety, worried all the time. Are they good enough? Do people like me? And you could see that as superficial, but if you really unpeel the onion or peel back the onion, you'll see that it's a lot deeper. And then it kind of goes back to what you guys talked about before you even put me on, about being present. Because I always start all of my treatment with the parents. I do a parenting session before I even meet the student.
Right.
And I will pretty much ask the parents about their childhood, much like you asked me, which is very interesting. And again, this is anecdotal, but I'm willing to say about 8 out of 10 times, a parent, because I usually, if I have both parents, it's great. That's not always the case, but I try to get both parents in, even if they're divorced, to sit down with me, feel my energy, and feel like if I'd be a good fit for their child. They will say, one of them will say, I had the same issue when I was in middle school.
Wow. Generational stuff.
Yep.
And it seems like if it's not cleared up in the previous generation, it just like continues, until it's dealt with. I mean, that's what I hear you saying.
Yep. And I feel like I can do a great work with a child, with all my students, but deep down in my own humility as a clinician, the best thing I feel like I can do to this day is help my students have a better relationship with their parents, because no one's going to love them like their parents, especially healthy parents.
Right.
And I go above and beyond to if the parents of the students are just having a hard time connecting with themselves because of past trauma, past distress, it makes it very difficult to connect with your child.
Yeah.
So I bang the drum of parents, you too should pursue your own treatments.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I was, I had a tough situation today. related to what we're discussing with the client who got some rough news yesterday. Family's divorce, and I work with them, and I can't go too far, but just the theme of a loss and the pain of the children who are of age range that you were referring to, just kind of moved me deeply. And so talk about when children lose a parent to death, when they experience families with divorce at a young age, particularly at the middle school level, creates some level of trauma impact that they have to deal with. When they come in to see you and you hear this, recognize this, especially a death, what is it that they are longing for in relationship with you, and what are you sensitive to that you want to offer back to them at the same time?
Yes, great question. The undercurrent that I get from, I've had too many students, unfortunately, lose a parent. It's like in the dozens, if not 100 by now.
Wow.
And it's not one of those things that I've never become desensitized to.
Yeah.
There's nothing more painful. Well, the only thing that's close to as painful as sitting with a child who lost a parent is sitting with a parent who's lost a child.
Oh, gosh. Yeah.
Because I'm a family therapist, so I've lost a few of my students tragically to death, and some of them had siblings. And I started seeing their siblings after their sibling passed, and I think they really appreciated that connection that they still had with their sibling. But back to what you were saying, Bernard, what they are wanting to hear and to be convinced of is that they're still going to be able to function in life. Obviously, they don't put in those words.
Right.
Their fear is this is going to knock their world off kilter and out of orbit so much that they'll never be the same.
Right.
And to a certain point, there is some truth to that. Your orbit does get altered. There's really no way around it.
Yeah.
And I will, when my students are ready to hear it, because they're not ready to hear it immediately.
Right.
I say we can try to get it as close to that old orbit, or we can create a new orbit together.
Yeah.
Again, when they're ready to hear that, because if you say that too soon, you will have lost them, because you would come across as very dismissive and insensitive to the pain that they're going through right now. So that's what this is like. They know they're in very rare company. They know it's exceptional circumstances, even from a young age. I've had 6-year-olds, 7-year-olds be like, my school still does daddies with donuts, and I'm the only one there that doesn't have a daddy.
Oh, wow. Yikes. Yeah.
And the thing that hurts the most about that, I mean, divorce is painful too.
Yeah.
But that's not it's a death of the relationship of your parents. They can still be very much a part of your life as parents. That will just be different. But when you actually lose the physical reminder and existence of someone you love that's raised you, that's the only thing you've ever known, it's very hard. It's still the hardest thing I do.
Yeah. I literally was sitting in the session when I heard the news. I was moved to tears because I knew them. I knew them early on, and it was very just hit hard right here, So with you having to see it probably more frequently, I can imagine that kind of holding that kind of energy and offering them compassion from your heart is both rewarding in its own way, both to you as well as the children who are receiving the care that they receive from you.
Yeah, and not only that, but because I've been doing this long enough, I mean, I would say the first time I probably had a student client that lost a parent in probably 2010, 2011. Yeah, I would say it's going to be okay. I didn't believe it. I just knew it was the right thing to say.
Yeah. Yeah.
20, I would say a few years later, when I actually could get I was going to say postcards, but postcards aren't really a thing anymore, but the email with a picture of a child that graduated from high school that I hadn't seen in years with their mother and appearing that what school he went to and that he's got a girlfriend and he's like living his best life. Then I started, now when I say it, I believe it because there is redemption because you can't control if you lose a parent.
Yeah.
But your life still can be okay. And you still hold your parent inside of you, all those memories that are still very sacred to you, that can't be taken from you.
Right.
So I have a question for you. I used to have a teen theater program, and one of our objectives was to get young folks, and it was around health and wellness, teaching, using performance for them to teach their peers about health and healthy living and healthy lifestyles. To what extent does your art, your work with recreation and play, does it include art in any form, even if it's them writing their story, doing poetry, doing any of that stuff? Just curious.
Yeah. So with me, again, since I have middle schoolers and high schoolers and mostly boys, I mean, I've had a few that felt vulnerable enough to go down that path. I mean, I majored in English literature, so I've read more poems than most. So I see the beauty in that and the healing nature of that. But because of that male ego, it's really difficult for them to go there. So what I do artistically with a lot of my students, I have them listen to, I listen to their playlist, which is, a lot of hip hop.
Yeah.
And then I find the instrumentals. And there's been times where I've had them come up with their own verse to the instrumental of the song that they really like.
Oh, nice. Yes, it's similar.
Yeah, and they'll be like, "Oh, well, I'm not as good as this person. I can't freestyle. I'm not any good." I'm like, "Look, there's nobody else that's going to hear this but you and I." There's no record button.
Yeah.
And sometimes I'll go out of my comfort zone just to help them feel more comfortable.
Wow.
Spit out a few lyrics. I'm not the best freestyle in the world, but I'm showing that it's okay. And then after we're done doing that, then I'm like, okay, let's write a verse that hits more close to home. Because at first they just want to have fun with it.
Right.
And then when they realize that's okay, then we'll do a verse that hits close to home. But what I'm mostly known for is my CBT. And when I do my sports with my kids, there are prompts. Like for instance, on my basketball court, I'll put placemats all over the floor. If you make a shot from a certain placemat, you flip it over and it has a prompt for you to talk about. Same thing with me. I make it cool.
Oh, wow.
Your feelings. And then I give them a homework assignment so that they can think about what we talked about, and also give them skills to rewire the way of thinking that has not been working for them. So that's also kind of a way of artistically getting kids to think differently, not necessarily through poetry, but with some of them, but mostly through, sports. And then when they do their homework with me, because I never wanted to be that type of professional that gave kids homework, because I couldn't stand my teachers when they gave me homework. I was like, it's bad enough I'm stuck in school for 7-8 hours. Now you're going to give me homework. So when they do the homework with me, they get a reward. I have a whole stock of basketball cards, football card packs, Pokemon cards. So they get rewarded for doing their homework with me. And they also get the reward of thinking more about what we talked about at home, instead of just in their 45 to 50 minutes with me.
And so we want to make sure that if people want to connect with you, I think there may be some people that just listen, they may be driving or something, but the best way is to get in touch with you. We can see it on the screen, Jordan at recplaycounseling.com.
Yes.
Right. And phone number 470-359-4852. And the website is recplaycounseling.com. So we definitely want people to reach out to you. So many young folks. It's just such a crazy world that we're living in, and maybe it's always been. But I just see so many young people just struggling, on a daily basis. So the work that you're doing is so very important,
Mm-hmm.
and we really appreciate what you're doing for the young folks.
Yeah, you're hitting the foundational period in that development, and very critical that they have, I think, someone, those who can get to it, like yourself, outside of the family, who can create a holding environment for them to, get clear as best they can about their identity, their sense of self, create a vision and dream of the many possibilities of who they can become. So it's very, very delicate, and we appreciate the work that you are doing in the lives of the children who make it your way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Definitely.
Yeah.
I don't know why your screen keeps seeming to get darker.
Oh,
Jordan.
It's getting dark outside.
Yeah.
Put this light on real quick. There we go. How's that?
Oh, much better. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
You're fading in the.
Now I'm just like super bright now. Wow. Okay.
You're okay. You're
Yeah,
okay.
that's
We just
good.
want to make sure
That's
people
good.
can see. And we are almost out of time. We just
Yeah.
have a few more minutes to wrap up.
Can you say something about children that you work with ADHD or ADD? What do you see? What do you notice? What are some of the symptoms of children who possibly may have this issue?
Yeah, and to be honest with you, when I first started out, when I look at the paperwork and I would see the symptom of ADHD, I'd get upset because I'm like, oh my gosh, another ADHD kid. Because I really did not understand the ADHD brain when I first started out. Even though I did the master's level, I mean, I understood it on a intellectual, mental level, but I didn't understand it. So it actually got me to research the ADHD brain, because I definitely don't have it. I have more of the standard brain. Standard. I don't like using the word normal. I'll just say standard for the traditional K through 12 school system. My brothers didn't have it, so it was completely foreign to me. And then the more and more I research ADHD, because it gets a bad rep.
Yeah.
It's a really bad rep. And in all honesty, it really doesn't function well in a traditional school environment. It's just not how it was designed. The traditional school environment asks our brain to be really good at 6 or 7 subjects at a time. The ADHD brain will fixate on something and be really good
at that thing.
Exceptionally good at that thing, which, I'm sorry, when you grow up and you start your career, what's expected of you? Is expected of you to be really good at 6, 7 subjects, or just to be really good and help the business make money with this thing that you do really well?
Yeah.
Once I understood that, it then became my job, because at the end of the day, you don't want to be dismissive and insensitive to the ADHD student that has to struggle through school and knowing that he's got many years left. By saying, okay, it's going to be better once you become an adult. You sit in their frustration, like, yeah, this is aggravating. I mean, who cares about this chemistry periodic table? Who cares about learning geometry? But I wonder if we can just do it good enough. Nobody's asking for all A's, but we can just do it good enough to get you to the point where you'll see your peers will be kind of stuck in an entry-level position once you reach my age. And then before you know it, you're just going to be soaring. And you're going to laugh at the frustration you had in school, because lucky for you, school ends. But when you go out and start your career, that's more of your life.
Life is on.
Yeah.
They have to be ready to hear it. Once they're ready to hear that, it means so much to them just to hear that another adult say that and mean it.
Yeah, thank you. I never heard it articulated that way before, because you're right. There's always this bad negative rap about ADHD. I have not done research on it, but to hear you frame it that way, that the school designed us to do 6 or 7 things at one time and do them all well, and bravo for those who can, but the brain is not really not necessarily wired and organized that way. It's like not all can do that. And so to help those who may be struggling, but can see that you're gonna do this one thing.
Mm-hmm.
That's tremendous. I appreciate that feedback.
Yeah. And half of it's explaining to the parents, because the parents, it's foreign to them too. They just feel like their kid is lazy, not trying.
Ah, okay.
So now there's conflict between student and parents. So it feeds this further conflict. And it really helps if we just kind of can sit back and just be curious about what's really going on here.
Yeah, you know, I witnessed that in my youngest son. He was able to do well in 4 of the classes when he had 6, and then there was 2 that he would struggle with. And I'm thinking, man, you're not studying hard enough, you know, and you got to. And then he went to do the 2 classes, and you know, he did exceptionally well in the same classes. But you know, I never thought about the way that you were describing this picture, but you know, I bore witness to that, you know.
And what's really cool with the ADHD student, if they're able to get to the level of college and then get through, I call the first couple of years of college, 13th, 14th grade, because it is kind of an extension of high school because you have to still do the prerequisites.
Oh, yeah.
But when they get into their major, they start getting all A's for the first time ever.
Yeah.
And I get that email. Mr. Jordan, I got all A's.
Wow, that's nice.
Told you so.
That's powerful. Wow.
Well, we're at the end, Jordan. So as we kind of wrap up, why don't you share with the audience what closing thoughts do you want to leave with them based on your experiences, based on what we perhaps talked about or didn't talk about tonight? What would you like to share as a way of closing out for us?
Yeah, I want to go back to I still believe the greatest gift you can give your child, all the parents out there, is a better connection with you. And that's the greatest gift. I mean, your child having a better connection with a parent, especially when they go off to college, because the world gets really scary. And a lot of, unfortunately, too many parents are just like, hey, I just need to do a good job up until my child is 18 and out the house. But the parenting kind of morphs and shifts into something else where your role is still very vital. And you want to be there for your child. And that's another reason why in my treatment, I do parenting sessions every 4 individual sessions where it's just me and the parents. And my student knows I'm seeing the parents. I'm just like, hey, I'm just helping your parents better connect with you. I'm not going to betray your confidence by explicitly sharing what you're sharing with me.
Right.
But I am going, based on what I've come to learn about you, help your parents to find better ways to approach and respond to you. Do more of what they're doing that's right, and then less of what's not working.
Right.
And so what I would encourage all my parents out there to do, whether it's with me or another clinician, get involved in your child's treatment. That doesn't necessarily mean find out what they're telling the therapist.
Right.
I mean, you're paying the therapist to help your child. Right. It would behoove everyone if you got involved in a way that is, I would say, that respects boundaries, but you're still very active in learning how they can, because, you know, when you leave the counseling center, it's just you and your student and your child again. So I advise and I recommend all my parents out there to get involved in their child's treatment in a way that the counselor feels comfortable with, and a way that the child feels comfortable with. The long reach effect that has on the family system.
Yep. Well, thank you so much for your wisdom and insights and just sharing with our listening audience. We encourage people to connect with you. Do you deal with people just in Georgia, or do you have clients who connect with you virtually from other places?
So if they've already been seeing me in person and then they go off to college, yes.
Oh, okay.
But I start off local because there's something about just the energy face to face. Okay.
All right. Thank you so much. And we hope to have you back in the future. I feel like we're just warming up, and there's a lot more to.
Thank you for having me. This was wonderful.
Welcome.
All right.
Thank
you. And we see you all next week. It is indeed for the ancestors that Progressively Yours Health and Wellness Podcast is for you. Ashe.
Ashe.